Hi BookTube, I'm here to wrap up the month of March. Unfortunately, and I should say probably yet again, I didn't do any weekly wrap-ups, which I would prefer to do because I read a lot of books. And speaking of that, I have a sticky note full of like statistics and whatnot, because I participated in 3 different readathons that I wanted to highlight. So I read books for March Mystery Madness, Middle Grade March, and March of the Mammoth. So I wanted to see how many pages I read for, like, considering like the Mammoth books, and I don't really count pages, but I did for this one and for this month. And then I wanted to calculate and see how many books I read for Middle Grade, all the different readathons, basically. So I'll just go ahead and talk about that now before getting into a little bit more about the books. So let's see here, I bought 32 books total for $76, and then I unhauled or read 43 of my books. So that's a good number there, 32 versus 43. And then for the pages, I read 9,388 pages. I didn't see what that would be per day, but yeah, that was a lot of pages. And then for the readathons, for middle grade March, I read 14 books, and I knew I would probably read at least 10, considering, I don't know, they're like 150 pages max, so I knew I was going to fly through several of those. And then for March Mystery Madness, I read 8 books. And then for March of the Mammoth, I read 2.5, 2.25. I read, so I'll get into a little bit now of what I read for these readathons. For March of the Mammoth, I read the New Yorker Book of Poems. This is, I don't know, edited by someone, maybe like the New Yorker. I don't know, does it say? Yeah, it says selected editors of the New Yorker. I don't subscribe to the New Yorker, but I've seen it around. This came out in 1978, and so it features a lot of authors, from the New Yorker around that time period. It's pulling from 1927 through 1969. Yeah, and the original of this came out in 1969, but this was published in 78. So like older poets that I am not aware of, never heard of. So that was interesting to see. Although with poetry, a lot of it's like, I feel like hit or miss. My favorite poet is Mary Oliver. So I feel like anything in that vein I would like. But this one, it was just okay. A lot of them were just okay. I didn't find any standout favorites that I would care to continue on with. There were several that were sprinkled out throughout this collection that was from the same poet. But it was still interesting to dip my toe in to the world of poetry. In the last, not this year really, but last year, I tried to read one poetry collection per month, and I think I ended up reading a couple from Mary Oliver because I found a poet I really liked, so I kept reading some of her works. But I wanted to branch out, so happy to have read this one. And then for the 0.5 book, or let's see, I read not much, maybe a sixth of this book. This is The Fitzgeralds and the Kennedys, an American Saga by Doris Kearns Goodwin. This was my favorite Mammoth, and you would think I would have finished it, but I didn't give it the attention it deserved, basically, because I was reading this at the end of the day, and I tried to do 30 minutes a day, but that most of the time didn't happen because I often was in the middle of a book or just finishing a book, so I didn't want to put it down to read this, and so I ended up just finishing that book, and then, oh look, it was time for bed, so I didn't end up getting to this, or just things happen. So for this month in April, I plan on making a time, or not a time, but just like finishing up some books and then just like dedicating myself to reading this book solely to get through it. I will enjoy it, that way the most. I am really enjoying this book, and I'm on the Fitzgerald. I haven't met the Kennedys yet, although they've been mentioned, because eventually one person from each of that family group are going to get married, and it's like the, setting off, their epic journey to be, with the presidents and all of that. So all that is to come. But yeah, greatly liking this one. Like I mentioned before, Doris Kearns Goodwin, I've loved all of her books, and I want to read all of her, all the books I've read so far, and I do want to read the rest of her collection. And then the other Mammoth that I read, I don't have anymore because I ended up unhauling it, and so I was selling some books, and so that was one I ended up selling with it. But I read the science fiction collection by, was it Otto Penzler, or I can't remember the exact name, but it was like a early like 2005 edition or so, and I liked it enough. But in reading it, like almost like the poetry, I don't know why I'm showing this again, but kind of like the poetry where I liked enough of them, but none of them stood out as something I would, okay, I have to go and find them kind of deal. I did learn like the different kind of science fiction I like. I don't care for the, what is it called, hard science, like that realm. I it's not for me. I don't know what you call it, the softer science fiction or what have you. But, and also another thing with reading that collection is I noticed I don't care that much for too much space incorporated in, like outer space incorporated in the stories or science fiction movie in general, because it honestly kind of freaks me out thinking of, being floating out in the middle of it. It always has, and it wasn't just this collection that pointed it out. But yeah, this just unsettles me. So I don't know exactly what kind of science fiction I need to read, but yeah, I did learn some things from these mammoths. Okay, so then let's see, we'll switch over to the middle grade March. I read all of the books I had, except for one. I read Ramona Forever by Beverly Cleary for a group buddy read that I've been working through. We've been working through the series one a month. But I'm not going to go into much depth into these books. I'm just going to basically show them to you. And maybe, like, if any of them stand out, then I will point those out. So these are the middle grade books that I read, except for the one Ramona book. So I'll just, like, briefly show these on camera. Because, again, I didn't do a wrap-up weekly, so I'm not going to go through every single book I read, I will say. But I'm just, like, wanted to highlight the readathons. So I read A Corner of the Universe by Anne M. Martin. I really liked this one. This was a Newbery Honor book as well. Prior to this, I had only read her famous, Babysitter Club books, but this one was fantastic. It was about Hattie, and she's in a small town, and she learns that she has an uncle that has a mental disability. It never really states what it is, but he basically acts like a child, even though he's in his mid-20s, and so he's coming back to this town after he's been in like a housing facility. And what I liked about this is he kept talking about I Love Lucy and quoting different parts of the TV show. So I love, like, it flashed in my memory so many times the different episodes that he was talking about. So yeah, this was just a very sweet, heartfelt book, and yeah, so I do recommend this one by Karen Hess. I read Just Juice, and Karen Hess wrote one of my favorite middle grade books, Out of the Dust, which was, again, I think a Newbery winner or honor book. But yeah, this one was good. But I can't go into too much detail of all these books. My goodness, or we'll be here forever. But with this one, the main character Juice. I should know that by the title. Her name was like Justine or something like that, but they shortened it to Juice. But anyway, she was basically truant for nearly all of this book, and the truant officer did come after them, the family eventually, but the parents were so lax with her going to school, and so it was just weird. Like, she would go like once every 2 weeks or something, because she didn't like the school part of like reading. She had a really hard time reading. But yeah, this was charming. Another charming book was Love from Your Friend Hannah by Mindy Warshall Skolsky. I've never heard of this author or this series, but this is like part of it was like an ongoing series way back when. But in this one, Hannah is trying to write to a friend who has moved away. But while her friend isn't writing back to her yet, and she writes to her grandparents and ends up writing to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president of that time. And so you learn about the character and her family and the town and all of that in the era, all through letters. And so yeah, this was very enjoyable. I tried to see if any of these books were available in ebook so I could read more of this series or from the author, but no, that wasn't the case. So I'll have to see what I can find. Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry by Mildred D. Taylor. This was pretty good. This was a Newbery winner. The Upstairs Room. This is a Newbery honor book. Johanna Reese. You can see I was trying to read as many Newberys as I could, so that I could also tick the box because I'm trying. It's an ongoing yearly project of mine to get through the Newberys, and I'm slowly but surely getting there. I want to read all of them. But yeah, this one was interesting because it reminded me of Anne Frank's diary. And in this case, the author herself lived through this, and she was in Holland when the Germans came through, and so she had to live in an attic and in different rooms of the house trying to hide from the Nazis. So because she was Jewish. So yeah, this was very interesting to read about. Harrowing as well. A Year Down Yonder by Richard Peck. This is a Newbery honor book. I don't just keep saying that because you don't know about the different color, the silver versus the gold. But Richard Peck is another author I have greatly enjoyed in the past. And this one is a sequel to his, I think it's called like Long Way to Chicago. Yeah, A Long Way from Chicago. And this one, they're revisiting the grandma, and the grandma like was the star character of the previous book, and she's very much the same now. She kind of rules the town, but pulls the strings without them knowing it, which was interesting to read about. And again, another book that's like kind of like historical, is taking place probably the time of the author himself, his childhood days. One-Eyed Cat by Paula Fox. Pictures of Hollis Woods by Patricia Riley Giff. I have several books from her. One of these Apple paperbacks. Nothing's Fair in 5th Grade by Barthy DeClements. The Witch Herself by Phyllis Reynolds Naylor, and she wrote the Shiloh series. This cover is just something else. And this actually is about a witch, and you would think it's like childhood, like, oh, they're pretending that the next door neighbor is has magic powers, or maybe their imagination is getting away from them, but no, actually a witch in this book, which is interesting. The Fledgling by Jane Langton. Okay, so those are the middle grade March books, and then as for March Mystery Madness, I only read 2 books from my shelves that I own. I got rid of the other ones. I looked through them and I was like, no. All of these I get from Little Free Libraries, because all the mysteries I can think of, I feel like, are available digitally. So I read all of those on ebook unless I happen to find one at a free library that sounds interesting. So with me unhauling all those other ones, I don't feel bad about it because I didn't pay for them. So we have No Greater Crime by Maddie Day. This is a country store mystery, and this actually fulfilled the prompt of the 9th book in a series. I didn't know it at the time, but it worked out perfectly, and I did enjoy the series that book quite a bit. So I might go back and read the first on. We'll see. And the other one is a Love Inspired Suspense, Deadly Cover Up by Kathleen Taylor. And this actually, of course, the cover is matching what happens in the book. They do end up in the water, which, again, kind of with the space thing, this freaks me out as well. Drowning. Oh, yeah, it's a bit harrowing to read about. Okay, so then I also wanted to mention the other mystery books I read were all part of different series, like these 2 were. So I read 2 books from the Mary Kay Andrews Callahan Garrity series. So this was the last book in the series, Irish Eyes, and the other one I can't remember the name of. I just wanted to show you one book per mystery series. But I read the 7th and 8th book in that series, and it's a little bit grittier than Mary Kay Andrews' newer books, because these are the first books that she ever published before she got into the more Southern women's fiction. These for sure are more like murder mysteries, but it still has some family drama in there as well. But Callahan Garrity is a retired police woman, and she now has her own cleaning business, and she's also a private detective. And so with that, you can see how she would get pulled into different mysteries, like knowing all these different people in the town and encountering like dead bodies and all these random houses she's trying to clean, that kind of thing. I will say though, this book is the 8th book in the series and the last one that's published, but it ends on like the worst note possible, basically, because the love interest that's been, they've been off and on throughout the series, and this one ends with her like, oh, I don't know if we ever can resolve like our conflict, basically. And it just leaves you like, I don't know, unsettled and not satisfied at all with this ending. And then she didn't continue on with the series because she started writing the Southern fiction books. And so when I was looking through the Goodreads reviews for this, one of the reviewers said that she got to meet Mary Kay Andrews at one of her book signings, and Mary Kay Andrews mentioned that she had always planned on going back to wrap up this series. And she does say, you know, of course, like the love interest, they do end up together and so on. But she did plan on writing a 9th book. But we'll see if it ever comes about. But this was perfect for March, for St. Patrick's Day, because this book, the murder and all of that, and a lot of the people involved in this book are all involved in the St. Patrick's Day parade and parties and whatnot, and Georgia and especially Savannah. This takes place in Atlanta, but I know Savannah is like notoriously famous, you know, for their St. Patrick's parades and parties, and so it for sure fits that bill for March. I read the 5th book by Andrew Maynes. This is Dark Dive, and the series isn't listed on here, but it's something like, I can't remember the series name, like Diver series, I don't know, but it's about a Florida diver who's also a detective, and I don't going to get too much detail, but this was a fantastic series. This one isn't the favorite book. I feel like the first and the second really hold the series up. The other ones are good, but not as good as the first and the second book in the series. Highly recommend that one. I read by B.J. Daniels, Crime Scene at Cardwell Ranch. Again, another one that doesn't list the series name, but this is like book 1 or 2. This is part of the Harlequin Intrigue. I really like B.J. Daniels' books. I read one other series from her. I read it all the way through, and this is the second series that I am going to read all the way through. I think, I want to say it's a Cardwell Ranch series, something like that. And then the last book for March Mystery Madness was by Lyle Nicholson, and this is Polar Bear Dawn, and this is Detective Bernadette Callahan mystery. Oh, another Callahan. This one, it was just okay. This is the first book, I want to say, in the series, and I didn't care for it too much. It opens with a bang. There's literally a polar bear eating a dead body, so it does, you know, set the tone a bit, but I didn't care for it at all, unfortunately. I mean, then, let's see, let me go back through. And so then, outside of all of that, I just wanted to mention 2 books that stood out to me that weren't part of any of those readathons. Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. This is a book I read for my own readathon from February. I was doing February favorites, where I was reading one book from a variety of booktubers who were talking about their favorite books from 2023. I can't remember who exactly mentioned this book that I, you know, got this idea from, but I love this book, and I listened to it on audio, and it was narrated by Meryl Streep, and I cannot recommend it enough. Like, she was fantastic. I even went through my library to see what else Meryl Streep had narrated, and I read another one of her books that she had narrated, Heartburn by Nora Ephron, and yeah, I love her narration. And then the other book, The English Understood Wool by Helen DeWitt. This is another one that stood out to me when I was combing through all the books that I had read, because it was so interesting. It was very short, but it was not the typical kind of book I would read. I would say it's definitely more in the vein of the literary fiction, which I don't read a lot of, but it's about a young woman who she is used to very much a high class style of life and very, very well off. Her parents raised her, you know, knowing which spoon to use and how to dress and act and things like that. But then she's all of a sudden left destitute, but she finds a way of being able to make some money, but still acts like she has a lot, you know, acts like she, you know, rules the world. And so through her actions with these different people, in different ways, they're trying to help her, kind of, or use her in some cases, like trying to take advantage of, you know, her new status. But yeah, it was a very intriguing book. I wouldn't say it's the best book I read or anything like that. I would say it's more of I was gonna review a star rating, or a 3 or a 4, 3.5, whatever. But yeah, very memorable, and that's always something to think about as well. Okay, so I will turn the camera around to just briefly pan around to show you the haul and the books I'm getting rid of or read, just for a little visual, because I have been doing it this past 2 months, because I have, like, again, I think I mentioned before, the bottom shelves, I'm trying to keep track and keep myself accountable to the books I read versus the books I am bringing in, to just make sure that ratio stays. More books I've read are going out the door than I've brought in, so they'll be around now. These are all the books I have hauled this month. Sorry for this glare on the sun, but it's a sunny day and I want to keep the windows open. I've shown you all the books I've hauled except for these here, because I did end up going the last day of the month to some bookstores, because I knew with April I wasn't going to be buying anymore, because I'm on a personal book buying ban every other month. But yeah, these are all the mass markets and the trade paperbacks, and I was trying to fit them by how they all line up, like the bigger books, and you get what I'm saying. That way they'd all fit in these stacks here. Okay, and then for the books I read and unhauled, so I've read all of these, and I wanted to get through some of these like big tabletop kind of books, because I have several of them. I did, and this is like a magazine book, I don't know what you would call it, that I read and looked through Norman Rockwell's. I probably should have shown you this one when I was talking about the different books I read. And so I have my 2 mystery books, and then all of these middle grades. And then I read this one and decided, I read this years ago, and I hauled this a couple months ago, but then when I thought about it, and I decided I'm probably not gonna reread it, or if I do, it'll be a while from now, so I thought just go ahead and get rid of it. And then I also am unhauling all of these mass markets. See, a lot of them are mysteries that I'm just like, meh, didn't care for them that much, so off they go. So anyway, I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, BookTube.